You believe in Buddha, don't you? Perhaps not as a deity draped in gold, but as something quieter, a voice that whispers not from a temple, but from the wounded chambers of the soul, there where the past still breathes in shadows, where dreams rot beside unspoken memories. There lies the Dharma, not as a doctrine, but as an ancient fire, waiting to be remembered. Once, there was a girl. Her name no longer matters, for she was everyone who has ever wept without knowing why. As a child, she was the mirror of her mother's anxiety, her father's silence, her society's fractured desires. Every emotion she wasn't allowed to feel became a ghost inside her body, haunting her in migraines, in failed relationships. In those nights, she screamed silently beneath the sheets. Her mind became a battlefield of unfinished wars. No one saw it. To the world, she smiled with practiced grace. But within, she carried a labyrinth of echoes, of things she could not name, only feel. And you, yes, you, how many times have you felt the same? That strange ache with no visible wound. That rage you judge but cannot tame. That emptiness so dense it swallows joy whole. These are not flaws. They are maps. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering is not punishment. It is the invitation. The flame that scorches you is not the end, but the beginning. It is the door to remembrance. For beneath every wound lies a lesson, and beneath every lesson, liberation. But the ego does not want this. The ego, that master illusionist, tells you that pain must be avoided, buried, numbed. It feeds you distractions, consumption, noise, applause. It weaponizes your past, disguises your fear as righteousness, turns your trauma into identity. And so, you perform your pain instead of purifying it. The girl grew older, and with time, her suffering evolved into sophistication. She read books on healing. She lit incense. She repeated mantras. But inside, she was still bleeding because she had mistaken spiritual decoration for transformation. Buddha spoke not of performance, but of presence. He did not escape the world. He sat beneath a tree and faced it. Trauma does not dissolve through avoidance. It demands your naked attention. The Buddhists call this vipassana, clear seeing, not with judgment, not with panic, but with gentle, radical truth. One night, the girl found herself on the bathroom floor, sobbing not for what had happened to her, but for the self she had abandoned in the process. And it was there, amidst the keys and tile and silence, that something cracked, not brokenness, but breakthrough. She began to witness her pain as a companion, not a curse. She saw how every memory was stored not just in her mind, but in her breath, her gut, her posture. She began to breathe with it, not against it. She allowed herself to feel shame fully, and in doing so, discovered that shame, when embraced with compassion, transforms into humility. There is a sacred alchemy in this. When you stop resisting the darkness, it ceases to be the enemy. It becomes your guide. So if you too carry a quiet agony in your chest, lean into it, not recklessly, but reverently. Listen to what it's been trying to say through the migraines, the failed loves, the late-night terrors. These are not accidents. They are breadcrumbs. And in that surrender, you will find something astonishing. Not weakness, but wisdom. The girl, nameless as she is eternal, did not erase her pain. She befriended it. And from that friendship bloomed a kind of peace that no therapy, no mantra, no guru could manufacture, because it was born of truth. And truth, once felt, never leaves you. She began to walk differently, not with pride, but with presence. Every step was a ritual, every silence, a sermon. She no longer rushed to fix what was broken. Instead, she bowed before it as if it were sacred, because it was. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is no enemy greater than avidya, ignorance, not ignorance of facts, but of self. The ignorance that makes you believe you are your thoughts, that your worth is measured by your past, that you must be good to be loved. But goodness, as taught by the awakened ones, has nothing to do with perfection. It is not the absence of flaw. It is the presence of awareness. To sit beside your own suffering without flinching, that is the first step toward enlightenment. You may think you must earn healing, that you must be stronger, wiser, more resilient. But healing does not arrive through force. It arrives when you stop running. Stop running from the pain. Stop running from the story you never wanted to tell. Stop running from the child inside you who still waits, day after day, to be seen. The girl, our eternal symbol, had spent years abandoning herself in the name of being enough. She wore masks of compliance, performed joy she did not feel, held space for others while starving her own soul. Until one moment, under the weight of another emotional collapse, she remembered the breath. Not a technique, not a trick, but the original breath, the one untouched by trauma, the one she took before the world told her who to be. That breath became her anchor. With it, she learned to observe her thoughts rather than believe them, to witness anger rise then pass like clouds over a still lake, to cradle fear without naming it a flaw, to touch her shame not as a stain, but as a soft part of her humanity. And you, yes, you, there is a breath within you too, a breath that remembers the self before the wound, a breath that can hold all your broken pieces without trying to mend them. Find it. In Buddhist psychology, there is a concept called dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of all conditioned existence. It is not pessimism. It is clarity. It is the awareness that nothing, no relationship, no status, no escape, can offer lasting peace. Only inner liberation can. This is not a rejection of life's beauty. It is the beginning of it. For when the girl stopped expecting the world to save her, she began to truly live in it. She walked through the market and smelled the fruit as if for the first time. She noticed the tremble in a beggar's fingers and felt it in her own veins. She looked at the face of her enemy and saw her own wounded reflection. Because when you awaken, duality dissolves. The abuser is also the abused. The tyrant, once a child, was also unloved. The woman screaming at the world is screaming for her own mother to return. You begin to see the architecture of pain, not to excuse it, but to understand it. And from that understanding, forgiveness flows, not as an obligation, but as an inevitability. The girl sat one day beneath a tree, and in the quiet, she remembered a phrase she had once read, but never understood until now. Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law. Not romantic love, not naive love, but the fierce love that arises from wisdom. The love that burns through illusion, that sees even in the murderer the echo of a once innocent boy. To reach this love, you must die. Not the body, but the identity you cling to, the stories, the blame, the control, the illusion of separation. That is the death that leads to rebirth. And in that rebirth, the girl no longer needed to be anything other than present. She did not transcend her humanity. She sanctified it. And in doing so, she became free. Freedom did not come like a thunderclap. It arrived gently, like the morning light that spills across a floor left untouched. It didn't roar or declare itself. It simply began to live in her gestures, her tone, her gaze. She began to smile at strangers not out of politeness, but from a place of unspoken kinship. Every person she passed became a mirror, some cracked, some polished, all reflecting some sliver of her own unfinished story. But there were days, yes, still many, when the shadows returned. Old memories resurfaced like tides drawn to the pull of unseen moons. The voice of shame would whisper again, cunning in its familiarity. You haven't changed. You're pretending. You're still broken. And that was the true test. Not in silencing the voice, but in sitting beside it. Not as prey, but as witness. She had come to understand what few ever dare to, that healing is not the eradication of pain, but the softening of resistance to it. The wound doesn't disappear, it becomes sacred. And you who have tasted both numbness and longing, this is your path too. Not because you chose it, but because it has already chosen you. The pain you carry is not punishment. It is the seed of compassion, buried in the dark, waiting to bloom. In Buddhist psychology, sati, mindfulness, is not merely awareness. It is intimacy with the present, to feel the rise of an emotion, to trace its texture, to greet it like an old teacher returning from exile. When the girl first practiced this, it hurt. It hurt to feel again, to face what had been exile for so long. But slowly that pain became something else, a kind of clarity, a kind of holy sorrow. She saw how often her suffering was not born from what happened to her, but from the meaning she wrapped around it. He left me, became I am unworthy. They hurt me, became I cannot trust anyone. These were not truths, they were stories. Stories shaped by fear, molded by a child's need to survive. But now she was no longer a child. She could rewrite them. And so, when abandonment visited her again, she sat with it, gently, without flinching. She felt the tightness in her chest, the urge to perform, to beg, to run. And then, instead of following it, she breathed, in out. And she whispered, not to the world, but to herself, I am still here. That was enough. Because liberation begins not in temples or retreats, but in these quiet rebellions. When you choose to stay present with your pain instead of escaping it. The Buddha taught that all suffering begins with attachment, not just to things or people, but to identity, to the story of who you think you must be. The girl had been attached to many identities, the strong one, the good one, the selfless one, but beneath all of them was something deeper, something nameless, like the sky behind the clouds. The Buddhists call this anatta, the not self. It is not nihilism. It is liberation from the illusion of a fixed self. You are not your thoughts, not your traumas, not even your name. You are the awareness that holds them all. And when you realize this, even for a breath, the entire world changes. The girl now began to live without armor. She cried when beauty overwhelmed her. She laughed without needing a reason. She forgave people who never said sorry, not because they deserved it, but because she did. Because freedom is not something you wait for. It is something you claim. One moment, one breath, one choice at a time. And if you too have felt the call to come home to yourself, not to the perfect, polished version, but to the raw, real one, then know this: you are not alone. The path is ancient. The journey is yours. But the truth waiting at the end is the same for all. You were never broken, only buried. There is a silence deeper than quiet. Not the silence of absence, but the silence that sings beneath all things. The silence of the breath before a storm, the stillness at the center of a storm. The girl had finally touched it. And in that stillness, she felt a grief that was not hers alone. It was the grief of centuries, the grief of generations of women who had been silenced, of men who had been taught not to feel, of children who had learned to betray themselves just to survive. This grief had no name, no single face. It was the collective ache of humanity, and it lived inside her. But instead of turning away, she bowed, because grief, like all sacred things, demands reverence. In the teachings of Buddhism, there is karuna, compassion not as sentiment, but as action rooted in understanding. Compassion that arises when you see the suffering of others not as separate from your own, but as reflections on the same mirror. This is the compassion the girl now carried. She no longer offered kindness to be good. She offered it because she understood. She could look into the eyes of a stranger and see the wound they were hiding. And when others tried to hurt her, she felt the sharp edge of their fear more than the sting of the insult. Pain, when understood, loses its poison. And perhaps you too, have carried pain that was never yours to begin with. The inherited sadness of a mother who never healed. The rage of a father who feared vulnerability. The echo of a society that taught you to smile when you wanted to scream. But listen, what you inherited is not your destiny. You are the turning point. The girl began to see this. She realized that healing wasn't only for her. It rippled into the way she touched a child's hair, into how she listened without needing to fix, into the softness she brought to rooms that once suffocated her. She was no longer a survivor. She was a healer, not because she had power, but because she had presence. Her life became a meditation, not in ritual, but in rhythm. Washing the dishes became prayer. Walking became a poem. Every act done with awareness was an offering. She no longer chased after love. She became it. But even love, she learned, must be held loosely. For the Buddha also taught anicca, impermanence. Everything passes. The dukkha, the sorrow, the body itself. To cling is to suffer. To release is to live. And so when she fell in love again, and she did not hold it in her fist. She let it bloom. She let it breathe. And when it ended, she wept. But not with bitterness, because some things are not meant to last. only to awaken. And that too is love, to hold with care and let go with grace. Perhaps that is what you are being called to now, not to get what you want, but to release what you no longer need. Not to be loved by others, but to remember the love already inside you. The girl, who was never just a girl, came to understand this. Peace is not the absence of storms. It is the I within them. She still felt fear, still had moments of doubt, but they no longer defined her. They became like birds in the sky of her awareness, flickering, then flying on. This was the fruit of her practice, not perfection, but peace, and in her peace, others began to feel safe. That is the gift of someone who is healed. They remind you of who you've always been. She had walked through fire, not once, but many times, and in every flame, she had found a fragment of truth. Now she no longer feared the burning, because she understood what the fire consumes is only what was never truly hers. The roles, the masks, the inherited guilt, the false self that clung to control. When all of it turned to ash, something ancient stirred beneath the ruin. A stillness, not empty but full of presence, full of clarity, like a mountain unmoved by the winds of opinion. In Buddhist language, this is nirvana, not heaven, not escape, but cessation, the extinguishing of craving, of illusion, of the endless cycle of becoming. It is not found in some far-off place. It is what remains when everything else falls away. And so the girl, this mirror of the wounded divine, came into her fullness, not by gaining anything new, but by letting go. One attachment at a time, one story at a time, one expectation at a time. It didn't make her passive. It made her powerful in a way the world could not understand. She no longer reacted, she responded. She no longer demanded, she allowed. And this, paradoxically, made her irresistible to life itself. Because life is not meant to be wrestled into obedience. It is meant to be danced with. And you who have fought so long to be seen, to be understood, to be held, what if the one you've been waiting for is not out there? What if it's the version of you that waits in the quiet, the one who does not need to impress, the one who has wept and survived and softened, the one who knows how to kneel beside their own sorrow and whisper, "You're safe now, I'm here." The girl's journey didn't end in transcendence. It ended in embodiment. She did not rise above the world. She fell into it, but with new eyes, with a heart unarmored, with boundaries not made of walls, but of wisdom. And this was the final test, not how well she could meditate, not how spiritual she appeared, but how she lived when no one was watching, how she treated those who could do nothing for her, how she honored her pain without projecting it. For pain unhealed becomes poison, but pain witnessed becomes prophecy. She began to teach, not in words, but in being. Her silence carried the weight of scriptures. Her presence healed what could not be named. People did not know why they wept in her company, but it was because she reminded them of home, not the home of bricks and blood, but the one that lives beneath the ribs, the home you left when you learned to hide, the home you return to every time you breathe fully, cry honestly, love fearlessly. And in that home, there is no need to be anything. You are already the Dharma, already the path, already enough. The girl looked up one day at a sky filled with migrating birds. Their wings sliced through the sunlit clouds like whispers of impermanence. And she felt it, a lightness, like something had finally been laid to rest. Not because the pain was gone, but because she no longer carried it as an identity. She had walked herself back from the edges of despair. She had forgiven the unforgivable. She had remembered who she was, for the world told her otherwise. And now she was free. Truly. No drama, no applause, just breath, just silence, just peace. That's how healing ends. Not with fireworks, but with the soft click of the door opening inward. Perhaps now it is your turn to return, to listen, to release, and in doing so, to discover the truth that all the sages whispered, all the Buddhas taught, all the wounds tried to show you. You were never lost, only asleep. And now you are waking up.